Welcome to On the Record, Updates and Echoes, a podcast by the Pocahontas Record Democrat. I'm Erin Summers. We're sponsored this month by Beam Real Estate. Stay tuned to the end of this episode for an interview with Beam's owner, Katie Halligan. On Saturday, I went to the co-op in Pomeroy to listen to our state senator and state representative at a town hall sponsored by Pocahontas and Calhoun County Farm Bureaus. A lot of the conversation revolved around property taxes, inheritances, and how state Republicans seem to have to hold their noses to pass a tax increase on Wellmark and other health maintenance organizations a couple weeks ago. But if they didn't pass that tax increase, Senator Tim Kreinbrink said, Iowa would miss out on $200 million in Medicaid money. You can read more about that in all three of our papers this week. But there was also quite a bit of the hour-long conversation that I just couldn't fit into the paper. For one, Kreinbrink brought up again the state of Highway 4 from Pomeroy to Pocahontas, joking that if he could just get some DOT officials there to drive it once, they would need an alignment on their car and they might get it fixed sooner. He said he has heard it's a project that's on the shelf at the DOT and it's working its way towards actual construction, but he wasn't sure when that would happen. The highway and its many potholes and bumps were a part of the conversation last year, too. Kreinbrink and State Representative Wendy Larson also talked about water quality, the use of chemicals on farms, and the recent report about cancer rates in Iowa. One of the farmers at the meeting says he's been a part of the survey that led to that study, where every few years he's answering questions about his own health and whether he's developed cancer after working with quite a few of those farm chemicals for years. Wendy Larson pointed out that the top three causes of cancer, alcohol consumption, smoking, and obesity, don't have anything to do with chemicals in the water. And they talked about the impact of all of the radon in the ground here in Iowa on cancer rates. It was a really interesting conversation. Wish I could have gotten more of it into the paper, but you just can't fit it all every week. There was a cool find up in Lorenz recently. Julie Wurr at Heart and Home made a neat post on Facebook last week. She had installed a chandelier in her downtown building that once hung in the Elite Theater in Lorenz. The chandelier is pretty big. It's glass. It's, I think, brass-plated metal. It's just very beautiful, and she found it at her aunt's house. You can read a little bit more about that in the Lorenz Sun and the Record Democrat, but we also want to pass along a big request from Julie for any of our local historians, genealogy buffs, anybody who has any pictures from Lorenz from 50, 60, 70 years ago. Do any of you have a photo of the interior of the theater, particularly if it shows one of the chandeliers? There were actually two. Julie would love to be able to display some historical photos showing the chandelier as it sat or as it hung in the theater in the early and mid 1900s. You can see photos of the chandelier in this week's papers as well as on the Heart and Home Facebook page. On Friday morning, I was sitting at my desk and a coworker came up to me and asked if I'd heard about an illegal immigrant who had been deported from Rolfe. I had not, so I pulled up Google and did a quick search, finding a press release from the U.S. Attorney's Office in Sioux City. As I read through it, I realized I had written about this man in July after he threatened his roommate with a machete. We don't get a lot of machete stories around here, and that one definitely stood out. You can read the full article in the RD this week, but the short story is he got 4 years in prison and hasn't been deported yet, although I'm sure that will happen once he serves his time. In all of our papers, you'll find election filings for the upcoming primary election. While Iowa has some hotly contested state-level races, Pocahontas County's local races should be pretty tame. It's all incumbents seeking another term unopposed. You can see who's up for re-election in our papers this week. In sports, the Pack boys and girls track teams competed March 23rd in Waverly at the Wartburg Indoor Meet. Haley Hosworth had the top finish for the Indians, winning the shot put with a toss of 38 feet and 7.25 inches. For the boys, Adam Marsh was 7th in shot put, and his teammate Carson Wielander was 7th in the long jump. The Pack boys team, along with both Newell Fonda track teams, were set to be back in action on Monday, March 30th in Lake City. The Indian girls were set to open the outdoor season at the Monarch Relays in Denison on Tuesday, and they were going to be traveling to Ogden for the early bird meet there on Friday. The Newell track teams will hit the track again on April 8th for the Sioux Central Relays. This week's BV Journal also has the Newell Fonda Spring Sports preview stories. You can find full season schedules alongside those stories. You will also find inserted in our papers this week our special Easter section with reflections from pastors and also Easter service times from all around the area. Next up is my interview with Katie Halligan at Beam Real Estate. Welcome to On the Record, Updates and Echoes, a podcast by the Pocahontas Record Democrat. I'm Erin Summers. With me today is Katie Halligan of Beam Realty. Beam Realty is the sponsor of our podcast for the month of April. Thank you for being here today, Katie.
Of course, happy to be here.
All right, I have some questions for you. So tell me a little bit about, you've had a few vintage houses go viral on social media. What do you think makes those houses so special to people? And, when you've had a post or a house for sale go viral, has it helped you sell that house? I'm really curious about that.
Good questions. It's kind of fun. It's fun to watch the numbers tick up as people share or comment or, kind of share their experiences. Most of the time, does it help it sell? Probably, just because exposure is a very important part of real estate. For me, it's entertainment because I get to hear more stories. And that's one thing that I love about real estate is just the sheer number of stories. The types of houses typically are going to be houses like craftsman style, your turn of the century. So anywhere from 1890, where you've got kind of Victorian crossing over into folk and craftsman, to into the 19 teens or even up through 1920s a little bit. So those simple craftsman styles are pretty popular across the country.
I think what I've noticed when you've shared stuff that's gone viral, people always notice the woodwork, which we have. I think my house was built in like 1920, and all the built-in wood stuff, and just like we have some stained glass windows, like that kind of stuff. They just don't put that in houses anymore. You just look at it and I just think, what would it cost to have this in a house now?
Exactly.
It's wild.
And each of those houses were all there might have been kits that people got or plans that were drawn up. Generally, those were what we would consider custom builds.
Yeah.
Where somebody was turning the posts for the staircase and the newel posts and things like that. That was hand turned and they were put in one by one rather than what we feel like it's really machine done now.
Yeah. What would you say is different about doing real estate in a rural part of the country or a rural part of Iowa? I mean, I know you've worked here and not in like Des Moines necessarily, but I mean, what do you think is different here? And what do you have to be good at that maybe a real estate agent in an urban area doesn't have to do? What are some of those fun skills you've picked up?
Well, ultimately, you just have to be a jack of all trades.
Okay.
So I wear many, many hats. Like today, I was just taking pictures at a listing. I don't have a photographer that I can hire. So I do it myself. So all of the little jobs that you might hire out, recommending for staging in terms of furniture, what decorations or what to put away, that's on me. Listing houses, listing farmland, listing commercial buildings all across the board. You're just kind of that jack of all trades, which is what a lot of us do in small towns anyway.
Sure.
We wear many hats.
Absolutely.
That's kind of the fun part though of rural real estate. I don't have to be super specific and be only a buyer's agent or only a seller's agent. I can kind of branch out and do lots of things.
One of the other really fun things I think you've gotten to do is work with people from out of state who've decided, I want a slower pace of life, and they have picked Pocahontas County, Iowa. What is it like working with folks? What are some of the states they've been from? And what do you have to do to help a client like that, get settled in Pocahontas?
Sure. I'll probably miss some, but for sure, Oregon, Alaska, and Florida, we've had California, I could probably start crossing off states, and maybe I should. That would be a fun map to
Make a map. Yep.
Yeah. And generally, a lot of times people can't come back to visit the house in person.
Sure.
So I have to be their eyes and ears and nose and all kinds of things. And anymore after COVID, for sure, we got into a lot more just video tours. Mm-hmm. So, a client would call me from out of state and I'd be like, I'd love to show you that house. Can we do a video tour? So I'd go through and take a live video on FaceTime or Skype or whatever the tool is that we could use. And that way they get the personal experience of walking through the house as close to physically as you can. And then they, if they like it, they'll buy it and then they move here. And that's a whole process that I try to alleviate at least some of the stresses with. Yeah. And then once they get here, I try to introduce them into the community. So I tell them to subscribe to the paper because that's one of that's one of the ways though that we get connected in our community and what's going on. So subscribe to the paper. There's some Facebook groups that are helpful for that too. And
Yep.
then just making sure that they have something that they want to plug into.
Have they stayed? Have you seen some stay?
Yes,
Most of them?
some have moved,
Sure.
but some have stayed as well. And the house types are all over the place. So,
Interesting.
and anywhere from, I mean, Pocahontas. I've had some in Palmer. I've had some in Rolfe, Lorenz. So kind of just all over the area that people have decided, I want to make this city and this town my home.
I think it's wild. And then I remember that I also moved to Iowa sight unseen. Like, it's been so long, I forgot I was also that. But I was at least moving for a job, like a specific job, but completely sight unseen. But I forget about that because it's been a little bit.
I typically warn people about the winters.
So. Oh, good.
They aren't horrible, but it does get below zero for a couple weeks out of the year.
Several of those places that you mentioned, just like their winter would not be the same as. I didn't think it would be that bad. I grew up in Indiana, and the winter here is worse still, and it's not that far away.
I always say, if it weren't for the wind.
That is all seasons of the year. What do you enjoy most about your job and living and working in Pocahontas County?
The people.
Sure.
I mean, it always comes down to the people, but learning their stories and figuring out how I can best help them with what my knowledge base is and what I enjoy. But from a job standpoint, it's different. Every single day, it's different. Every transaction is different. Every house is different. Every situation is different. So I have to adapt for every single one. And that's great. I love it.
You're never bored.
I'm never bored. And even though the paperwork might be very, very similar, there's always just a bit of nuance with every transaction that you just want to make it work for both the buyers and the sellers so that at the end of the day, they're happy and can move on into whatever their next step is.
Okay. What could we use more of for housing in Pocahontas County? I mean, population is shrinking, but also like number of places to live also feels like it's shrinking, and maybe not like at the same rate.
Yeah. I think generally across the United States, you would see that our inventory is lower than where it probably should be. And a lot of things factor into that. But, ultimately, if you had enough inventory or a little bit more, a little bit in excess, the prices would be cheaper. Of course, it's supply and demand. But in Pocahontas specific, in terms of a hyper-local market, I would say, people are doing pretty well buying up houses that would make good rentals, because that's a niche that we need.
Sure.
We've got plenty of people who maybe home ownership isn't their cup of tea, but they need somewhere to rent. We're a little bit light on what I would consider kind of that boomer generation to be moving into. So you've got the couple steps or zero entry, and in Pocahontas County that's pretty tough because of course our basements get very wet. So we want to be raised up just a little bit, but more of those houses would be nice so that you can have that whole migration where some of the older folks or people who are looking to be in their last home move into the single level zero entry, and then the next person can buy their house that's available and kind of turn it over that way. So either side of that, I think, is helpful, both on the rental side for people who, maybe home ownership isn't their thing, or maybe eventually in a couple, 2-3 years, it will be. And then on the flip side, where they're looking for their last home. Yeah,
I've heard that from a couple different people and perspectives. People, new teachers moving into the community, you're not ready to buy a house the minute you move to town, or you're fresh out of college, or someone's getting a job offer. I know Lorenz, they have historically had quite a few industry jobs, and people live out of town and would rather live in Lorenz and not commute. That each community has some of its own different needs, but I think it's just
similar uses too, where it's like, hey, I'd like to rent for a year, maybe 2, and then I'll decide if I want to buy, or, they move on and find a job somewhere else too. So,
anything else you'd want us to know about being a real estate agent in Pocahontas County?
It's fun. I love it. I love the people. I love living here. I'm very happy that we got the chance to move back and raise my family here. Obviously, I was born and raised here as well, so I think it's pretty special.
All right. Well, thank you so much for talking with us, and thanks again for sponsoring our podcast this month.
Of course. Thanks.